Hello. Well, I got one person here, so get my material. Hopefully, somebody else comes in here pretty soon. So as soon as somebody else comes in, I'll start going over this stuff. Some very interesting stuff here, though. But reading from the Legend of Dent's Lost Gold Shipment from James P. Burke, and I missed the story somewhat, like little bits and pieces. Basically, I caught a couple blurbs here and there. Nothing more than maybe 5 or 6 paragraphs. And reading this is, I mean, it's not that big of a book. It's only 46 pages. But with this here, this is probably the most comprehensive book that I found on the matter. And what's interesting about this, instead of answering questions, I have more questions than now than this book has had then. Let's put it that way. And with, I mean, there's some really crazy stuff that went on here. Number one. Number two with this is the more I read this, the more I'm kind of seeing that a lot of stuff that was found, I think, was meant to be found. They never found the gold itself, and I think all the quote unquote evidence that was found or clues that were found were meant to lead people away than lead people toward. But we're going to start at the very beginning of this, and there is a lot of questions I have because this, it gives you where the gold started from, but there's like a whole section of country missing. I mean, there's a lot of information that people just cannot get to that would answer a lot of questions. And one I didn't get answered, and I'm pretty sure it was. In fact, I could probably get that answered right now as we're doing this. Hey, CD. So I'm going to start reading here. Is there gold in them there hills? Maybe, maybe not. But the possibility there may be has captivated the attention of thousands of people over the past 150 years searching for Dent's lost gold shipment. Whether or not this story is true, it continues to lure many gold searchers to comb the hills and valleys of the Dent's area to look for this lost treasure, which is true. People have been looking for that. A firm called Finders Keepers supposedly said they found it, which I don't believe they did. They said they did, but I don't think they did. Because they said they found it, but they couldn't produce any evidence that they found it. Then they said the FBI conveniently took it over, which the FBI was up there. But I honestly think the FBI didn't find anything either. Okay, the answer is that. But I think everybody was going off this. Everybody, as I said, was going off the same amount of clues, ending up in the same spot and not finding anything. It's kind of like the definition of insanity, but instead of the same person trying the same thing over and over again, a different person's trying the same thing over and over again, thinking you're going to get a different result, and you're not. I'm still trying to come up with an idea where this gold is at. Um, I don't think it's very far from there if it's still there, and that is, I'm going to give that about a 30% chance. Only 30%. The other 70%, I think it's long gone. Um, as we go deeper into the book, and we're not doing the whole book, this is going to be probably like a series of live streams. But as we go through the book, there's certain things in the book that says that maybe the gold was already found or is already being used or what have you. But on to the second paragraph here. The purpose of this narrative is to present all the information at our disposal for your consideration to make a determination on the Dentron lost gold shipment. Also, based upon this information, various theories pertaining to this story will be presented. The story takes place in 1863 in the midst of the American Civil War. The Union Army of the Potomac is recovering from his defeat at Chancellorsville, while at the same time, General Robert E. Lee, commander of the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia, is setting in motion a second invasion of the North. As the legend goes, the Union War Department authorized a shipment of 26 50-pound gold bars from the Granite Lady Mint in San Francisco to be transported to the mint in Philadelphia for the purpose of financing the cost of the Civil War. So we know where the gold started from. The gold actually started from San Francisco, and I'm pretty sure it was shipped by rail. No, it actually says it's shipped by wagon, which doesn't make any sense, but okay. I think there's some things that were changed for more dramatic. Some things, because I can't see during that time, especially when steam trains are around and the country is linked east to west, that it wasn't shipped by rail. But we'll move on here. As a wagon train carrying the gold arrived at Camp Dennison, Ohio from the mint in San Francisco, Confederate cavalry under the command of General Jeb Stuart and John Hunt Morgan were active in Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. As the Confederate activity in the area was most alarming to the Union, and the Harrisburg and Philadelphia were bracing themselves for Lee's invasion, the decision was made to safeguard the gold shipment from Confederate interference by rerouting the shipment from a southern to a more northerly route across Pennsylvania. Instead of shipping the gold on the railroad directly to Philadelphia as originally planned, they would ship the gold by wagon train using a northern route. The plan was to send the wagon train up the Allegheny River to the Clarion River and then cross over the Continental Divide. Yes, there is a Continental Divide in Pennsylvania. To the headwaters of the branch of the Cinemahoning River in Emporium. From there, the plan was to raft the gold shipment on down the Cinemahoning to Lock Haven. It is interesting to note that this would follow basically the same pathway that Thomas Kane and the Bucktails used when they rafted down the river to Lock Haven from Driftwood to join the war effort in 1861. Okay, so the next place that we know the gold was at was Camp Dennison in Ohio, which is down by Cincinnati. And we know the route it took. And where they're going to start from here. For this mission, a battalion of 8 armed guards was organized, commanded by Lieutenant James Castleton. Castleton was serving on the staff at Camp Dennison, recovering from a hip wound he received in the Missouri campaign fighting the Jayhawkers and malaria he contracted during the Mexican War. He was born in 1825 into a family with a prominent military background and had attended West Point for 2 years. Okay, the question I have here is why would you put a wounded lieutenant on a mission of this importance? You would want everybody in fighting shape, not just, okay, he's a lieutenant, he needs something to do, we'll send him with this gold shipment. Michael Rourke was assigned as Castleton's sergeant, although O'Rourke had a dubious reputation and was allegedly wanted by authorities for various drunken brawls that may have involved murders. He had a natural talent in handling troops, an ability Castleton lacked. Again, the question I have is if they knew this about O'Rourke, why are they sending someone who likes to get drunk and fight and possibly killed people on a mission of this caliber? It's some of the stuff just doesn't make sense here. A man known only as Connors was selected to guide the mission. He was currently serving on a limited duty at Camp Dennison and apparently had knowledge of the area the wagon train was to follow. He was described as a sullen and unfriendly sort of character. Okay, that kind of makes sense. He knows the area. Another question I have is, were there 8 guards and these 3 were over and above that, or were these 3 part of the 8? But so far in this, and I've read through this like 3 times, at this point of the story, the 2 people that are of interest right now are O'Rourke and Connors, because Castleton is pretty much out on his feet. He's not going to be able to do anything anyway. But O'Rourke and Connors, though, are 2 people of interest to me. On June 1863, Castleton was given his orders in Wheeling, West Virginia, to take command of this mission. He was advised that the cargo was 26 bars of gold hidden in false bottoms of the 2 supply wagons. He was also under strict orders to keep the contents of the gold confidential, and under no circumstances was he to reveal the contents of the cargo to any member of the wagon train. And so we kind of started to get a couple questions answered. The only one who knew about the gold was Castleton, which is pretty much incapacitated anyway. So the addition of O'Rourke, because I think they just wanted him out of their hair for a while, and the addition of Connors to guide them through makes sense. They're still people of interest, though. The wagon train was comprised of 2 supplier freight wagons, as well as a Union ambulance, which departed Wheeling, West Virginia, and headed north out of Pittsburgh on a wagon trail, which generally followed the course of the Allegheny River. Okay, so there's 3 wagons on here. The ambulance wagon makes sense too, because Castleton. They probably used that to keep tabs on them, and he probably used that as a command wagon as well. So that makes sense. They made camp near the town of Butler, which isn't far from me. From this camp, the wagon train proceeded north to the confluence of the Allegheny and Clarion rivers, making camp along the old Clarion Trail. On this leg of the journey, Castleton began suffering from frequent malaria attacks. During these attacks, he would turn over temporary command to Connor. This practice would continue throughout the entire trip, causing the command to shift back and forth from Castleton to Connor. 3 days after leaving their camp near Clarion, they made a camp in a clearing near the town of Ridgeway. Here, Castleton, still bothered by malaria attacks, decided that he and O'Rourke would go into Ridgeway and obtain some Peruvian bark or quinine to help quiet his malaria attacks. but they're unable to find any medicine to help his problem. When they inquired at a local tavern, the natives mistakenly took the two uniformed Union soldiers as army recruiters who had come to draft them into active service. A fight broke out, and the two were lucky to escape with their lives. So right now, O'Rourke and Castleton is separated from the rest of it. And we don't know if Connors at this point knows anything about it or not, or O'Rourke knows anything about it or not. But O'Rourke and Castleton, the two that are supposed to be in command, are gone, which leaves Connors in command, is kind of very interesting in and of itself. Because with a shipment of this importance, you'd think one of them would stay there and Connors would go, leaving O'Rourke back there. So it's a little funny here. Breaking camp in Ridgeway, they continued on their way on a wagon road that followed Elk Creek towards St. Mary's. Upon reaching St. Mary's, they received a very unfriendly welcome, a totally different reception than they had received in Ridgeway. While in St. Mary's, they met with someone who gave them a map entitled Wildcat Country circa 1842. And one thing about the Wildcat Country map, nobody's been able to produce or find a copy of it. So we don't know exactly what was on this map. For all intents and purposes, it could have been a fake map made to lead them into a trap. So that's another thing of interest right there. That's like one of the very first clues of what could have went wrong. As the month of June was coming to an end, the gold caravan departed St. Mary's with a woodhick who they acquired as a guide and continuing on a wagon trail that followed West Creek downstream to the village of Swissmont, where they deviated from their plan to proceed into the Emporium and instead took what they considered was a shortcut over the mountains to the mouth of Hicks Run on a Bennett's branch of the Cinnamahoney. So Hicks Run, well, first let's cover a couple things one thing before we get into Hicks Run. A woodhick was somebody who worked in the sawmills, who worked the lumber industry. The lumber industry in that area during that time was huge. They got up in those mountains and they would clear cut those mountains from one end of the mountain to the other end of the mountain, leave nothing standing over most of the mountain. One thing I found out is if you find one of the old maps of the railroads that would go up and down those hollows, if it wasn't on the map, they weren't cutting it. There are a couple instances where I found that on another one of the maps that was put in here. Now, it was not the Wildcat Country map. It was another map, and that's later on in the book, and we'll get to that. The other thing is, Hicks Run is on the other side of Thunder Mountain. There's a mountain in between those two called Thunder Mountain. Let me explain the mountains in that part of Pennsylvania. They're not that big. They're not that wide. My uncle has a camp not on Thunder Mountain, on the mountain on the other side of Hicks Run. It's called Houston Hill. And the highest point on that whole mountain, I think, is maybe 21 to 2,200 feet above sea level. That's the highest point. I mean, as mountains go, that's pretty small. Thunder Mountain, I think the highest point on that's about 1,700 feet. So in each one of those mountains, I think Thunder Mountain at its widest is maybe about a mile. And that's at the base. It's not across the top. That's at the base. The top isn't really that wide at all. I mean, you could walk across the top in a matter of minutes. Not hours, not, I mean, probably 10 minutes. If you went from one ridge across the mountain to the other ridge, it'd be about 10 minutes at most of the points across that mountain. So they're close to Dent's Run, but they're not in Dent's Run. So that's another clue. The caravan headed off in a southerly direction up a valley that was a tributary of West Creek, where they crossed current Pennsylvania State Highway Route 120, a short distance east of Goat Summit, which is the mid-continental divide of the Susquehanna and Ohio River watersheds. Guided by the 1842 map called Wildcat Country, they continued on a logging road in a southward direction until they encountered a junction of trails that wasn't shown on the map. Here they felt the best option was to follow the most promising trail until they followed the trail in. Oh, okay. A little misprint in the book here. They followed the trail until the trail petered out. The tall virgin pine that covered the forest and blocked out the growth of the underbrush made it possible for the wagon train to navigate through this wilderness area. The decision was made to continue on heading in the direction of their goal, the mouth of Hicks Run, a tributary of the Bennett's Branch. So, one thing I didn't do is I didn't find West Run on the map. That is going to tell a lot, because if I remember where West Run's at, it's nowhere. It's not really that close to Hicks. It's actually on the other side. No, it's on the other side of Houston Hill. It's down by what they call Sterling Run. So these guys are not really going down Hicks Run. They're kind of going east of it, if I remember right. Next live stream, as I said, this is going to be a multi-part live stream deal here. So next live stream, I'll get that straightened out. As the wagon train weaved in around the tall pine trees, they became lost and confused. They continued until they came to a steep hillside that dropped into the Hicks Run Valley that the wagons could not negotiate. Castleton's malaria symptoms had worsened to the point that he drifted in and out of consciousness, and during one of these severe attacks, he inadvertently blurted out that the cargo was gold bars hidden in false bottoms of the two freight wagons. Okay, so now everybody knows. And with that being said, I think some wheels got put in motion by both Conley, who's still with them, and O'Rourke. The other guards doesn't say anything about him, but I'm sure something was going on in their heads too. So gold makes people do silly things. So frantic over their situation, a decision was made to dispatch an escort for help, pack out what gold they could carry, and bury the rest. Connor and two other men known only as Billy and Sam would go for help. Connor would later report that when he departed for help, Castleton and O'Rourke were arguing over whether they should try to carry out all the gold or carry out what they could and bury the rest. Okay, here's in the story where both of them became people of interest. Billy and Sam, whoever those two are now, are also people of interest, because I think it could be all four of them working together. I haven't really quite tied that together yet, because you have O'Rourke and Castleton arguing over what they should do with the gold. And then you have Connor, Billy, and Sam going for help. Or are they buying time? See where I'm going with this? There's a general note on this. On Connor's way for help, he traveled but a short distance through a virgin pine of the upper Bell Draft area until he encountered logging roads and trails of Miles Dent logging operations. By 1863, Miles Dent had cut most of the native pine trees from the confluence of Bennett's Run and Dent's Run and Bennett's Branch to the confluence of Dent's Run and Bell Draft. So there's nothing there. It was the first part of August. Now let's go back to when all this happened here. Okay, so this until August, everything happened in June. So there's like a month to 2 months that are not accounted for. As the first part of it was the first part of August when Connors arrived at the army post in Lock Haven. One account claimed that Connors returned to the abandoned wagon 10 days after he went for help, while another account claimed once he reached Fort Round Island near Lock Haven, it took 2 weeks to organize a rescue party. Still another account claimed that in August, a wild-eyed, hysterical Connors staggered into the village of Lock Haven and told a pitiful story of the death of every member of the expedition and the loss of the entire cargo. Now, you got three different accounts saying three different things, but all of them place Connors in Lock Haven in August. Was he buying time? Okay, let's go over this. One account claimed that Connors returned to the abandoned wagon 10 days after he went for help. Did he return to see if the gold was still there? Did he return to see if everybody was okay? Or did he return, try to remain unseen, and just observe what was going on? Did he find something? Didn't he find anything? So there's a bunch of questions right there. While another account claimed once he reached Fort Round Island near Lock Haven, it took 2 weeks to organize a rescue party. At a fort, there's always people at the fort. Townspeople were, depending on how friendly they were with the fort, would probably be more than willing to help. So them taking 2 weeks, I find something's off there. Still another account claimed that in August, a wild-eyed, hysterical Connor staggered into the village of Lock Haven and told a pitiful story of the death of every member in the expedition and the loss of the entire cargo. Okay, who killed him? It could have been Connors that killed them all. We don't know. And he did that as a cover. Because one thing I'm getting from a lot of this is that people don't give the folks back then credit. I'm thinking over that amount of time, you can stage a lot of stuff. Connors said he found him dead. He wouldn't be exactly lying about it because he never said how they died. And he could have been the one who found him dead after he killed him. Just saying. As an interesting note, during the time the wagon train departed from St. Mary's until Connors reached Lock Haven, the Army of the Potomac defeated the Confederate Army of Northern Virginia in the Battle of Gettysburg and forced the retreat of the Confederates back to Northern Virginia. So there's another historical account of what was going on and why they rerouted everything. A rescue party under the command of Captain Davis, accompanied by Connors, was dispatched. The party traveled up the Bennett's Branch and crossed over Thunder Mountain to a location where the remains of several of the wagons were found. Connors can remember if any of the gold was buried, or if it was. He couldn't remember where it was buried. Captain Davis reported that when they arrived to the location, the wagons were abandoned and it was apparent that the group had split up. After several days of searching the area, the only things able to be found were several trails leading in a southwest direction. He further included in his report that it was his opinion that the shipment had been stolen. I think Captain Davis is on something here. There were three military court martials convened in Clearfield, PA, to interrogate Connors with regard of his knowledge of the missing gold. Very little knowledge was gained from these proceedings, and the court could not find any misconduct on a part of Connor. The Army felt he was complicit in the theft. There was insufficient evidence to indict him. Because of this, the Army reassigned him to serve the rest of his term of service in California, where they could keep him under surveillance. It is claimed that while stationed in California, he would on occasion get drunk and brag he knew where the gold was buried in the mountains of Pennsylvania. Yeah, so I think the Army was onto something, that Connor knew what happened. Exactly what happened, they don't know, but Connor knew a ton more than he was leading on that he knew. Okay, so moving on from there, so the gold shipment at this point is now lost, stolen, misplaced. It's lost. It poof, vanished. The Pinkerton detective agents were given the task of finding the lost gold and the men involved in the missing shipment. Alan Pinkerton convinced the War Department to classify all information and records pertaining to the gold shipment to deter local residents searching for the gold. Several teams of Pinkerton detectives Moved to the area. These detectives began moving from place to place, posing as prospectors and lumbermen, asking discreet questions in order for any of sudden prosperity. Donovan and Dugan were among two of the Pinkerton detectives sent here to investigate the lost gold shipment. In 1865, they found 2½ bars of gold buried under a pine stump about 4 miles south of where the wagons had been abandoned. When they retired from the agency in 1871, the two men returned here and built a cabin north of Benezet, where they continued to search for the gold. In 1866, two other Pinkerton detectives found a team of mules identified with an Army brand in the possession of an old man living in Chase Hollow. The old man claimed he found the mules wandering in the woods. That's suspect. Because if he found the mules wandering in the woods, my thought is that they used the mules to pack the rest of the gold out. Once they got the gold to where they wanted it, either where they hid it or where they found a better way to move it, their usefulness was over, cut them loose. In 1876, a survey crew resurveying the El Cameron boundary found the human remains of 3 to 5 people scattered around near a spring at the head of Bell Draft, about 7 miles where the wagons had been abandoned. Okay, there's a cartoon presentation here, and I'll read through the cartoon presentation. I can't really show you the pictures though, but it's very interesting, some of the things that this brings up. So as I said, this is giving me more questions than I'm getting answers. I am getting some answers, but not many. During the Civil War, a shipment of gold bars valued at today's prices at $2 million. So this is an old cartoon that was made, because I've figured out the estimation of the gold now is over 66 million. vanished in northwestern Pennsylvania. The story goes that in 1863, a Union Army lieutenant was ordered to transport a false bottom wagon. Now, this is only one wagon, containing 26 gold bars weighing 50 pounds each from Wheeling, West Virginia to Washington D.C. Okay, so it's not going to Philadelphia. In the cartoon, it's going to Washington, D.C. So there's a couple conflicting things right there. His escort was a civilian guy named Connors and 8 cavalrymen. So that says there's 10 people. Now, when I brought up the question about the 8 guards and were those over and above or part of the 8, that's still about as clear as mud because every time you find a different story on this, you get a different count of how many people were there. This is kind of like the telephone game. Somebody said something, and the more people pass it on down the line, the more convoluted and garbled up and mixed up it becomes. The plan was to avoid Confederate forces by heading northeast to the town of Driftwood, PA, then build a raft and float down the Susquehanna River to Harrisburg, then overland to Washington, which the other story said they were going to Lock Haven, not Harrisburg. So there is a lot of not only conflict but misinformation between the two stories here. Throughout the journey, the lieutenant kept getting one fever after another. While camped at St. Mary's, he got so delirious that he blurted out the secret of the gold cargo, which came as a shocking surprise to the other soldiers. That confirms what the other story said. The cartoon doesn't say why he got sick, but that we know has passed between two stories, so that's true. Special footnote: while the cavalry guards waited for the lieutenant fever to break, 125 miles to the south of them, a battle was raging that would be the turning point of the war, Gettysburg. Early one morning in July 1863, the Gold Lane expedition left St. Mary's, heading for Driftwood, and was never seen again. Okay, the first story said June. This one's saying July. So that's a discrepancy of about a month. Could one or the other be right? Of course they could be. But still a discrepancy nonetheless, because the first one was about 2 months before Connors showed up at Lock Haven. This one is 1 month before he showed up at Lock Haven. Okay, and this is a continuation of that cartoon. During the Civil During the Civil War, July 1863, a wagon load of gold bars worth $2 million, along with his army escort, vanished somewhere in the forest of Cameron counties. 2 months later, a hysterical Mr. Connors, the civilian guide of the expedition, staggered into Lock Haven. There we go. About 50 miles east of St. Mary's, where the convoy was last seen. Immediately, the army sent investigators to grill Connors. There we go. So they hired Pinkerton detectives to search the area, but all they found were some dead mules near Dent's Run, just off today's State Route 555 in L County. So now the mules are dead. Still, what I'm thinking is if the mules were alive and that guy found them wandering around in the woods, or they found them all dead in one spot. If they found them dead in one spot, those mules were killed. They didn't die of natural causes. They were killed because usefulness was ended. Now, here's the thing: if they were killed here and the gold was elsewhere, they killed them here for a reason, to lead them off the track, buy time. So that's my thinking here, because I think everybody kind of looks at this as a cut and dry type of thing, and I don't think it's cut and dry. I think it. I would say, if I had to venture a guess, for the gold wagons or wagon, if they had all 26 bars in one wagon, anywhere from 5 to 8 mules. I'm thinking 5 or 6, maybe 8. If it was split up between two wagons, probably 4 to 6 per wagon. That's just what you said. It was split up between the two. Connors claimed the expedition was ambushed by bandits who killed all the soldiers, stole the gold, and left him for dead. The army did not buy his story. That's totally understandable. Especially if, see, what I want to know is when he came into log cabin, he was delirious. I want to know if he had any wounds. Were there any wounds on him other than bumps and bruises? Did he survive a gunshot? Did he survive getting smacked upside the head by the butt end of a rifle? These are things I want to know. Other than he showed up and he was delirious. He could be delirious because he drank too much. Who knows? In the early 1870s, some human skeletons believed to be those of the soldiers were found in the same area. Okay, they were believed to be those of the soldiers. Were they? Because if they were just found laying on top of the ground, again, I have a couple more questions. The first question is how were they found? If they found them during a survey, I don't think they were buried. They may have had some stuff after 7 years of leaves and everything else accumulating on top of them. They probably were buried with leaf debris, but I don't think they were buried. Um, were they arranged like they were executed? Or were they along a path, all kind of laid in different, they may be laid in different directions, like one laying on his side, one laying on his back, one laying on his face, but were the feet and head all pointed in the same direction, like they were running away from something? Or was it more random? That that tells a story. The way the bodies are found will tell a story about what happened at that time. It might sound like a macabre question, but it's a question that needs to be asked. Connors was, quote, drafted into the Army. Now, according to this, that he wasn't in the Army yet, so he was drafted into the Army and sent to a remote fort out west. The Army refused to ever discharge him. So I think he was actually, according to this, if they refused to ever discharge him, something was telling me that he was serving a sentence. He was being punished and serving a sentence. Because after your conscription is up, you should be able to just walk away. He became an alcoholic and often said he knew where the gold was hidden, but when he was sober, he couldn't remember anything. Allegedly, the Army searched the Dent Run area in the past 30 years, but none of the gold was ever found. You see, that's what I'm thinking too. As I said, I keep on bringing up Connors, but I'm pretty sure that if Connors did it or O'Rourke did it, he had accomplices. No one else was ever named in this. And if you went with an ambush, because back then they didn't run ballistics back then. You can say they got ambushed. You don't know where and the gold got stolen, even though you and your buddy shot everybody. If nobody was there to see it, nobody knows. It's like, well, yeah, they're ambushed. Gold's gone. We're going to try to find it. Meanwhile, these guys know where it's at, and it's long gone at this point. Okay, and the next section of the book is analyzing the original gold story and lost gold story. The Dent Run lost gold shipment is not only an interesting story, but it creates a number of questions. When the FBI did their investigation in a dig in the spring of 2018, I know how that exactly, seeding, and if they were arranged, they could have been marched and said, "Okay, start running." Like their logic says, "Okay, if you just go this way, we'll let you go at a certain point." They let him go, then they shot him dead as another breadcrumb to lead people away. So, because if you listen to this when you're reading the original story, Dent's run wasn't mentioned to the end, but most sounds like most of the action actually took place in Hicks, which is another small watershed in and of itself from Dent's. Those two don't touch each other; they're separated by a mountain. So there's a little flim flam going on here. And in the spring of 2018, a group called Finders Keepers supposedly found the gold, and the FBI supposedly took over to the dig. I called Finders Keepers on that. Me and Finders Keepers are on a website called TreasureNet, which I'm going to be going back to here soon in the near future to check some stuff out. But not only me, a bunch of us called Finders Keepers on what they said because all of a sudden we're like, produce some evidence, something, because we didn't really. I'm not really. I would love to find it. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to find it, but if I found it, the FBI is getting involved. I'll call the FBI myself. I'm like, hey, I found your stuff. Because if I found it and tried to pawn it someplace, that's going to land me a lot of years in club fed because that gold literally belonged to the government from the get go. That's all government property. It's not like I'm going out and digging it out of the mountainside someplace like a claim. Okay. The Mountain Zion Historical Society was contacted for information pertaining to the story by numerous reporters as a result of the society having the story posted on their website. These reporters included the New York Times, CNN, a London newspaper, a German treasure magazine, a Canadian radio station, and a local TV station, together along with a host of others. Some of the most relevant questions asked about the lost shipment are listed below. The first question is what was the origin of the gold story? It is claimed the story was found on the back of a bedpost in Caledonia about 50 years after the alleged shipment happened. That brings a lot of stuff into suspect. I find that unless they didn't say exactly how it was found, whether it was carved there or, well, some people say it was carved into a bedpost. I'm like, not that many people take that much time. I think what some people did back in the day as a decoration, because I've seen a couple of the pieces of furniture, like this antique furniture, is they would take pieces of newspaper, kind of coat them in glue almost like a paper mache, but they would do the whole sheet, and then kind of like laminate that sheet on there, and the glue would make the glue would dry clear, make like a protective coating on top of that, and it covered up a lot of ugliness, even though it wasn't the greatest looking itself, but it was something that some of the people used to do to just to kind of brighten the place up. How many bars are being shipped? The answer is 26 bars of gold, although some accounts of the story have mistakenly reported 52 bars. Why did they choose Connors for the mission? Connor was selected as a guide. It appears he apparently had knowledge of this area and that he may have had relatives or friends living near the intended route of the gold shipment. This is another reason why Connors, to me, became a person of interest. Arthur Connors was a member of Company K of the Bucktails from Clearfield. In addition, the 1850 census shows a William Connor who had a hotel in Coal Hollow, Fox Township, Elk County, and a family by the name of Connor living in Dent's Run. However, to date, we have been unable to make a link between them and the Civil War Guide, because the Civil War Guide only give his last name. His first name is never mentioned. But if I had to venture a guess, it would probably be the family by the name of Connor living in Dent's Run that he was part of, if I had to venture a guess. And I said Dent's Run is not that far from Hicks. What I would be interested to know is where were they located at in Dent's Run? Where was the Connor house? Where was, or a homestead, or what have you? That is one thing I'd be very interested in. Because if the gold is still in Dent's Run, I'm thinking that that Connor house was on one side of Dent's Run, while the clues took everybody up the other side of Dent's Run. Dent's Run is a very wide watershed. The Dent's Run watershed is very wide, where the Hicks Run watershed, not so much. Who was the person who gave the caravan the map in St. Mary's? That would be the Wildcat country. The Army might know the census in Pennsylvania at that time was not the greatest. Um, in fact, at that time, this was straight up Appalachia. Uh, when they talk about the Appalachia hillbillies of that time, that's what they're dealing with here. Not saying that they ain't smart, but that's what they're dealing with here. There wasn't a really organized census here in Pennsylvania until probably about 1910. They said, well, they live in a house in Dent's Run, and that was about it. And so many people live in the house. There wasn't any addresses, no nothing. It's just a house in Dent's Run. This person remains a mystery. Dick Dornish, in an article published by the St. Mary's Daily Press, identified him as Richardson. That could be anybody. And I'd be interested to know how far in the St. Mary's area the Richardson name goes back. If it goes back well beyond 1863, that may lead some validity to it. But other than that, this Dick Dornish, when he did his article, also could have pulled that name out of thin air just for dramatic sake. Do you have a copy of the map called Wildcat Country? To the best of our knowledge, no one has found this map. Prior to the 1840s, this area was referred to as Wildcat Country, and there may have been a map made when the area was first surveyed. However, there are several old maps showing the route that was probably followed by the caravan. Do you think the gold was stolen? Yes, but I do believe there are still some of the 26 bars of the gold still lost somewhere between Dent's Run and Trout Run. This is evidenced by the Pinkertons finding 2 1/2 bars and the federal and state governments actively searching for the gold. I think they're on a wild goose chase, myself. They said they found that gold underneath a stump. The Pinkertons did. I want to know how it was found underneath the stump. Because if it was like buried underneath the stump or stuck in a hole someplace out in the middle of nowhere, you have to remember this area was like clear cut. Many of these areas were clear cut. Did the Pinkertons find it, or did somebody find it and bring the Pinkertons while they're logging, find it and bring the Pinkertons in? Or did one of these guys, one of these Pinkertons, were they in on it? That's the only way that they could find it is if they were actually in on it, because that's a little bit too convenient. Unless the gold's just kind of sticking up out from beneath the stump. Again, depending on how many people there are, you're still in 26 bars of gold. Now, it may sound silly to leave it behind, but they left some behind to sweeten the pot to think that, hey, we found 2.5 bars. It's still, some of it's still got to be around here someplace, very close. That's a thought I had. You don't take everything. You take enough. You take more than enough, actually. You leave a little bit behind someplace else to lead people off. It sweetens the pot, if you will. I know it kind of sounds crazy, but if you think about it, and you're trying to lead people off in the wrong direction, what better way to do it? Do you believe Connors was complicit in the theft? It would appear that not only was it would appear he not only was complicit, but was the person who planned and organized the theft. That I totally agree with. Even though I still haven't ruled out O'Rourke as an accomplice. Both those guys are still people of interest to me, especially O'Rourke, who likes to get drunk, start bar fights, and kill people. If he does that, stealing something is not going to be out of the realm of possibilities. Why didn't Connor seek help in the village of Dent's Run when he went for help? On Connor's mission to go for help, he would go but a short distance to the virgin pine of the upper Bell Draft area until he encountered logging roads and trails of Miles Dent logging operations. By 1863, Miles Dent had cut most of the native pine trees from the confluence of Dent's Run and Benish Branch to the confluence of Dent's Run and Bell Draft. It took a month or more from the time Connors departed for help until he arrived in Lockhaven. It would appear he was buying time. That I totally agree with too. Is there any other source of information that you're currently investigating? It would be interesting to review the FBI file. I do believe there's information on the lost gold shipment that may be found in government archives, Pinkerton files, old newspaper articles, and various historical societies. The internet now provides us with easier and faster access to much more information than we had just a few short years ago. The coming of the internet has provided us with easier and faster access to information. Okay, he just said that twice. Never mind. Does the FBI have a classified file on this story? It is obvious that they do, or they couldn't have authorized a dig in 2018. Do you think the government has attempted to cover up the information on the story? Yes. Why hasn't the FBI released the file under the Freedom of Information Act? Very good question. Extremely good question. Also, why have there been changes in government maps, and why is the government active in various areas relating to the lost gold shipment? Also, two good questions fired back. Do you know where the gold is buried? Now, this is This is asking the author here. I've been looking for over 50 years and have yet to find any gold. However, I'm currently searching in several interesting sites together with seeking additional information relative to this story. So he's still currently looking for this. Now, this is one guy I would love to sit down and talk to because I'm still formulating what happened here. And there are a couple clues that popped out to me that tells me that I don't think it's in Dent's Run. If there's anything left in that area, I don't think it's in Dent's. I think it's moved out of Dent's to another hollow. Where exactly, I don't know, but we'll get into those clues a little bit later on. We're going to finish up this page and finish up the. Actually, no, I think we're going to finish up the live stream right there. And a lot of this I find very interesting in many regards. Because there's stuff in here. The other thing he provides, which I'm not putting in here, in the book, if you get the book, he actually provides GPS coordinates where some of these places that he found are not the gold, but clues. So I think that would also be interesting to go actually lay eyes on these clues myself and see what I can make from them. But that's all I have for tonight. So thank you for coming, CD, and everybody else who showed up. There's upwards of 30 at one point in time. But I'll see y'all later, and we're going to do part 2 next week. So thank you very much. I love y'all. Talk to y'all later. Bye.